Okay, so we just went through a couple of days ago how to classify triangles based off of side, 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 angle, angle, side, and angle, side, angle. And what we're doing is we're proving that two triangles are congruent using those different theorems. So I'm going to say them again. Side, 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 angle, angle, side, and angle, side, angle. So we need to prove that two triangles are congruent, and we need to use one of those four different theorems. Now, we had you classify the different theorems a couple days ago. Now you need to actually prove those theorems. So we're going to use proofs. So we're going to start with side, side, side congruence postulate. Now, you can prove that two triangles are congruent based off of the side, side, side congruent postulate. And what that means is that three sides in two triangles are congruent. So here we've got MN is congruent to QR. And the way that we classify that is we have these notches here. So then we can say NP is congruent to RS, and then PM is congruent to QS. And we use the notches to tell us what is congruent. So let's go down here to side, 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 the actual proofs. Now it says here that we need to prove that triangle PQW is congruent to triangle TSW. Now basically here the statement is that PQ is congruent to TS, and that PW is congruent to TW, and finally QW is congruent to SW. Now the reason that is that it was given to us. So we can now prove that triangle PQW is congruent to triangle TSW based off of the side, side, side congruence theorem. Now let's look at example 2. Now what was given to us, so here in the diagram, the red marks were actually the ones that were given to us. So side KL is congruent to side KM. And then we've got LN, or side LN, is congruent to side MN. And that was given to us. So the reason, the statement, we just stated it, and the reason is that it was given to us. Now we want to prove that these two triangles are congruent based off the side, side, side theorem. So we're missing a third side. So here I said that KN, so the statement is KN is congruent to KN, and that's based off the reflexive property. So now that we have all three sides are congruent, we can now say that triangle KLN is congruent to triangle KMN based off the side, side, side congruence theorem. And let's do one more. So we're given that N is the midpoint of LM. So what that means is that KM, okay, so that's all that's given to us actually, okay? That N is the midpoint of LM. We're also given that KL and KM, these two sides here are congruent. So that's what I put. The statement was that KM is congruent to KL. So KM congruent to KL. That was given to us. Also, it was given to us is that N is the midpoint of LM. Now, LN here, LN, is congruent to MN. That is the definition of midpoint. So the definition of midpoint is that LN and MN are congruent, because if N's the midpoint, then LN has to be congruent to MN. And I went ahead and I drew that in here. Then our next statement, because of course we're trying to prove that these two triangles are congruent based off the side, side, side theorem, I have two sides and I have to find my third side. So I said that KN was congruent to KN. Here, KN is congruent to KN because of the reflexive property. I now have all three sides of both triangles congruent, so I can say that triangle KLN is congruent to triangle KMN because of the side, side, side congruent theorem. Okay, so the next one that we're going to try to prove. So again, we can prove that two triangles are congruent based off the side, side, side theorem and the side, angle, side theorem. The side, angle, side congruence postulate. So side angle side, what that means is that two triangles are congruent based off of their sides and their angle. So here's an example. It says PQ is congruent to WX. And then our angle has to be in the middle because it's side angle side. So the angle has to be in the middle of both of our sides. So here we've got angle Q is congruent to angle X, and side QS is congruent to side XY. So we can now prove that both of these triangles are congruent. Triangle PQS is congruent to triangle WXY because of the side angle side congruence postulate. So let's look at an example. The example says, prove that triangle AEW, so AEB, is congruent to triangle DE and C. So our statement here, we need to see what was given to us. And here in our picture, it's given to us that side BE is congruent to side CE. That is given to us. And also what was given to us is AE is congruent to ED. So that's what I put here. And the reason is that it's given to us. Now it says that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent. Why are they congruent? We need to figure out why. What's the reason? They're congruent because they're vertical angles, and vertical angles are always congruent. So we can now prove that triangle AEB is congruent to triangle DEC because of the side angle side congruence theorem. Okay? All right. Let's go do one last example of side angle side. Now here it says that prove that triangle VWZ is congruent, so VWZ is congruent to triangle YWX. Now again, in our picture here, it was given to us that side VW was congruent to side YW. So I've got that here. And it was also given to us that CW was congruent to XW. The reason is that it was given to us. Now, angle VWZ is congruent to YWX because of vertical angles. Again, vertical angles are congruent. So we can now state that triangle VWZ is congruent to triangle YWX because of the side angle side congruence theorem. Okay? All right. Now the next two that we're going to look at, so we have side, 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 angle, side. There's two more theorems that you can use to prove that two triangles are congruent. You can use the angle, side, angle, and the angle, angle, side theorem postulates, or congruent postulates. So let's look here at some definitions. I know that you've already gone through this with Mr. Livingston, so I'm going to go pretty fast through this. So your angle, side, angle congruence postulate states that you've got two angles, so two angles on either side, and a side in the middle because it's angle, side, angle. So your side has to be in the middle of your two angles. So here we've got angle A is congruent to angle D, and side AC is congruent to side DF, and then lastly, angle C is congruent to angle F. So we can say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF based off of the angle, side, angle congruence postulate. And lastly, we've got the angle, angle, side congruence postulate. So again, we've got to follow what it says, angle, angle, side. So we have to read angle, angle, side, angle, angle, side. So here it says angle A is congruent to angle D, and angle C is congruent to angle F. And lastly, side BC is congruent to side EF, which means that triangle ABC is congruent to is congruent to triangle DEF based off of the angle, angle, side congruence theorem. So let's look at two examples. I'm going to first look at the angle, side, angle theorem. So gets given to us right here. It's given to us that that side AD is parallel to side EC. That's what this little triangle here means. It means parallel, not congruent, parallel. And it was also given to us that side DB or BD is congruent to side BC. So that's given to us. So I went ahead and wrote side BD is congruent to side CB. Again, the reason, it was given to us. and AD is parallel to side CE. That was given to us. Now, we're looking for angle, side angle. So, we got our angle here. So it says angle D is congruent to angle C. How did I figure that out? Because D and A are parallel. Now remember, two lines that are parallel is cut by a transversal. We've got alternate interior angles, and alternate interior angles are congruent. So angle D is congruent to angle C based off of alternate interior angles are congruent. And then lastly, we've got angle ABD and angle CBE are congruent because both of these angles are vertical. So our reason is vertical angles. So we can prove that triangle ABD is congruent to triangle EBC because of the angle, side, angle postulate. Now remember, our sides got to be in the middle and our two angles have to be on the outside. So angle, side, angle, and angle, side, angle. Now let's talk about the angle, angle, side theorem. Now, in angle, angle, side, that's how it has to read on your diagram. Angle, angle, side. So let's see, it says, given that angle B is congruent to angle C, and angle D is congruent to angle F, and also that M is the midpoint of DF, we need to prove that triangle BDM is congruent to triangle CFM. So, let's write our statements. Angle B is congruent to angle C, got that here, and angle D is congruent to angle F. That was my statement, and that was given to me. That's why. That's the reason. It was also given that M is the midpoint of DF. So again, the reason I put given. Now, DM is congruent to side FM because of the midpoint definition. And remember that if M is the midpoint, then that means it cuts it in half, which means that DM has to be equal to FM. So now we can prove that triangle BDM is congruent to triangle CFM because of the angle, angle, side congruence theorem.